Hey, what is going on, everyone? Thank you for joining us for another episode of Refresh.Church vlog, and we'll figure out a name at some point, but for now, it's what we've got to go with. My name's Adam. I'm with the digital team here. And first off, thank you this is now week 3, so technically it's season 1, episode 3 of outlining the journey of Refresh.Church and where TJ and his family have come from and where they're going. And everything in between, where we're doing our best to do this weekly now. We're getting close, so every Tuesday we're trying to drop new videos. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment on these videos. We want to make sure that what we're talking about, what we're delivering, hits the mark for what you want to know from TJ about life in general, the Refresh.Church, and everything in between, right? This week, a great topic is why the Treasure Valley, and really specifically how God led TJ and his family to land in Boise, Idaho, the Treasure Valley. We'll go through why does a city or town or any location need a life-giving church? What exactly is a life-giving church to? Hint, it starts with community, fulfillment, and legacy. I'll let TJ expand on that here as we get going. But other than that, welcome to another week. Thank you for watching, and here we go. Refresh Church fam, this is Adam again here with you. This is week 3 of this video podcast. We're not sure what we're calling yet, but what we're doing is we're going step by step, week by week of how Refresh Church came to be. Whether that's from the initial conception of prayer, figuring out where in the world God was sending Pastor TJ Hankey and his family, how to find a spot. We covered last week quite in depth, which was pretty cool to hear the story of landing in Treasure Valley, finding the school that God was calling y'all to, as well as a few other cool things along the way. This week, we're going to spend a little more time on why the Treasure Valley, but not specifically the location per se, but how you got there in the terms of prayer time, God calling, because that's really important. That's the major thing there. Before I get going, TJ, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. We are in the launch phase of our church. We've kind of moved fully into the launch phase, not prep, not fundraising, fully launched. And so we've been meeting people, growing our team, had our first worship night this week. And in about a month, we'll start launch team meetings before our run up until launch.
Gotcha. And that was a real cool thing. I wasn't obviously able to be there. I'm in Austin, Texas, but I heard that it was just a fantastic time with the launch team, with a lot of cool people coming out of the woodwork, that God always does that, to bring together a really great service, which I'm really excited to hear. Wish I was there, obviously. So this week, with whatever we decide to name this eventually, maybe someday, maybe not, we want to cover specifically how God moved you to the Treasure Valley, Boise, Idaho. What the steps were, I think, in a little bit down the road, and we'll cover why any city needs a life-giving church, whether big or small. And then, as always, we'll wrap it up with some applicable takeaways in that 2-minute timer. I'll start for you, as we like to do here at Refresh Church. So with that, let's get going. Why the Treasure Valley? How did God get you to realize this is the spot for you?
So, I mean, in episode number 1, we covered a lot of just saying yes to God, and really that's what it boiled down to us. We tried to be as healthy as we could. We tried to get as much wise advice as we could, and really it turned into just this burden and this calling. I believe that God unburdens his people. He says, "My yoke is easy and my burden's light." So he reburdens people. So he says, "Come to me, all who are weary, I'll give you rest." So he's taking off these burdens. But then he says, "I'm going to give you a new burden." And that new burden for us was the Treasure Valley, to plant a church here, to pastor people here. And we knew we were supposed to be here. We just didn't really even know why until we got here. We just knew this was the place. This was where God was calling us. This is what we're supposed to do. And then we kind of got the why. Once we got into the city and began to observe, here's how things are working. And let me throw out a couple of statistics for you. For this Treasure Valley area, it's the Boise metro, for those of you who don't understand this area. There's a bunch of little cities in a string. They're not even cities. Not even small. They're good sized. anywhere from 200,000, 100,000, 80,000. I mean, it's just in a string, so it's known as the Treasure Valley. And this area is growing faster than almost anywhere else in the entire country. In the last 10 years, Idaho, percentage wise, has grown faster than almost every other state. It's only behind Utah, and Utah had a big boom in that early 2010 to 2013 range that kept it up above everywhere else, or above Idaho. But it is incredibly fast growing here, and we need 200 churches of 250 people just to maintain the growth over the next 20 years, or 10 years, sorry, just to maintain the spiritual saturation, the gospel saturation in this area, because 90% of people do not go to a gospel church. That means 10% of people are in church on a Sunday. And so we're like, okay, we're showing up here, we're kind of understanding the culture a little bit, we're learning these statistics, and it's like, wow, there are a lot of people here that need what Jesus offers. And I know that's true of every single city. But we got here and we just saw person after person after person that was moving here and looking for a better life and trying to find that something that pushes them over the top. You know what I'm talking about? Have you ever been there where it's just like, if I got the new fill in the blank, I would be happy, right? The job, the car, the raise, the whatever. And I see people moving here and they're really just looking for that new life. They're looking for that new opportunity. They're looking for a better life for their family and for the people around them. And it's not unlike Idaho's history. I mean, people moved to Idaho to begin with because they were looking for gold. That was like the major settlement push for this area. And there wasn't a lot of gold to be found, honestly. There was some, but not a lot. But then they learned, oh, the soil is good for raising crops, and there's these vast grass valleys, that they can raise their livestock in. And so they were looking for one thing and they got another. They were looking for a new life in gold, but they found it in something else. And I think the same is true today. Maybe people are looking for new life in stuff, things, better life, better schools, better fill in the blank, right? But I'm praying that they don't just find it in those, because they never really will. But we can be the kind of church that brings the refreshing of God to their life, the new life that Christ brings. And when we can be that kind of presence, we can help them discover the life that they've been longing for, that they didn't even know they needed. And so to kind of summarize it all, people feel kind of stuck a lot of times. That's why they're coming here, is to get unstuck. And then they get here and they realize, I'm still me. I still have my same issues. And the worst part is, as if it's not bad enough to be stuck, it gets worse because they don't know how to get unstuck. They don't know that God has a better plan for their life. They don't know that there's a something that he's done for them that get them unstuck. And so that's why we feel it's absolutely necessary to start this church, that people are in need of getting unstuck. And there's nothing more able to get them unstuck than that refreshing presence of God. And so Refresh.Church is here to do that.
And this isn't the first time that God's done this in your life, right? I didn't count 3 major times, and then I'm sure there's more than that. But if I'm thinking for you, shoot, there was the time to go to California. There was the time to go back to Florida, and then there's this one. Did all 3 of those look different? They come in different formats, or are they pretty much the same thing of God pushing you out of a train saying go?
I guess in a lot of ways they're similar because God never changes. I feel like my maturity level has changed through this. I'm much more willing to say yes to the voice of God, and to do it with wisdom instead of reckless ambition. I don't know. I'm walking in a lot more confidence, that's for sure, because I know God has done it before. He's going to do it again. And the similarities are hear the voice of God, wrestle with the call, say yes, and get into a new place and go, okay, God, why am I here? I knew I'm supposed to be here, but why am I here? And that's been a pretty common theme in my life. Obedience first. You take that first step, and then God begins to reveal the next one. And as you accomplish some vision, he reveals more vision, step by step. And so that's kind of been my history in that. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And with that, you think about And I know we've touched on Treasure Valley area, and you gave some astounding facts. I think the first episode of this, where
Yeah.
in order to keep up with the rate of growth that Boise Metro and really
Hmm.
the Treasure Valley is seeing, there's an alarming amount of churches that need to pop up. Um,
Yes.
which is mind-boggling if you think about it. Although, from my standpoint, and maybe not from God's got it all handled. But that kind of slides into the other aspect of, you feel the calling, you dial in with what God's telling you to go do, you do it, you get there,
Yep.
and you establish roots and you do the church plant thing. But
Hmm.
why? Like, why does every
Yeah.
community need a
Mhm.
life-giving church in its presence? And maybe it's multiple,
Yeah.
because of, you take into demographics, the amount of people in a city that, different styles,
Yeah.
all of that. But why is that so crucial?
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, every city needs at least one life-giving church. Multiple life-giving churches is always better, and I'm blessed because I've got some great guys around here, whom I love dearly, and they are life-giving and they are life-giving churches. But when you look at the whole community, the legacy of church has been, maybe a little legalistic. Maybe there's been a lot of infighting, and so when Christians can't get along, non-Christians are like, I don't want anything to do with that, you know? Where life-giving, I feel like a life-giving church is loving the churches around you and supporting them and calling them and just having that camaraderie that we're here to win the valley together, or we're here to win this area or this city or this metro together. So every community needs that life-giving church because every person needs new life. And and so what that person experiences at a life-giving church, I can think of three things. The first one is community. They 100% find relationship. I ran into someone at a Chick-fil-A today. Didn't know them. They just stopped by our table, said, "Hey, I like that hat. Where can I get one?" Boom. And they're like, we're in conversation about church, Jesus, like community, everything. And they're like, we didn't know that you could have community in a church until we came to the church we're in right now, which is not my church because my church doesn't exist yet. And so we got great churches here in the valley. But they said, I didn't know that my kids could have friends in church, that we did things outside of the church. I'm like, that's insane to me. That that concept of community was so new to them. They came here looking for better schools and a better life from a different part of the country. And what they got was community. And that is the life they really needed. They didn't need better schools, they needed friendships and relationships. And so it's the cure for loneliness, and it's the cure for this isolation issue that we've been feeling, in this COVID world. And honestly, it brings healing into our life. That we go to God's people to get healed, right? Like His God gives us salvation, but He says, "Go to my people, pray for each other, confess your sins to each other, and you'll be healed." We need that, and so community is a big deal, and that's what people find in a life-giving church. There's two other things. The first one I would say is fulfillment. Sorry, the second one, community is number one, fulfillment is the second one, because everybody's got a purpose, and when you start living that purpose, your life looks different. You act different. I feel like you even breathe different. Your shoulders are a little more relaxed, and you're a little more confident in your walk. You're like that breath of fresh air from God is just breathed into you, and because you know who you are, you know who you're created to be. You know that God gave you a reason to live, and so for us, a life-giving church means you're discovering your purpose. You're finding out what your gifts are. You're getting coaching and discipleship in those areas on how to be the person that God called you to be. My favorite verse comes from Philippians chapter 3, where Paul says, I take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. Like Paul's saying, Jesus saved me for a reason, and I'm going to live the rest of my life chasing after whatever that reason, whatever that purpose, whatever that calling is. And when you live with that kind of purpose and calling, it just changes the way you live. It puts a bounce in your step. It's that burdening, the second burden that Jesus gives you. He takes one off and He puts one on. Fulfillment in there is so important, like living that real life that God called you to. And it's something that no amount of money could buy, and having that peace in that direction. So I think it's pretty imperative that people experience that. And I think life-giving churches bring that to you, you know? And then the third one for me is legacy. As a dad, you're a dad, I'm a dad. Leaving behind a legacy is pretty important for my kids. To me, I want to make sure that my kids have a foundation in their life. And I think Life-Giving Church sets the stage for legacy. Because when I'm finding community and I'm being healed and I'm finding just great, healthy relationships, my kids are too. When I'm being fulfilled in my purpose and my calling, I'm more filled with joy, and I'm showing my kids what life looks like when you're living with the full presence of God and you're living according to his will. You know, it changes the destiny of your family. So the next generation and the generation after that, there's this generational growth that begins to occur. And so in my life, I didn't grow up with that, and I'm committed 100% to have that legacy being left behind. Like, this is how you serve God. This is how you find joy in life. This is how you have real friendships and community. And so Life-Giving Church, those three things, community, fulfillment, legacy, it brings a difference to the entire community because each individual is walking in the fullness of who God created them to be. So that's my 2 cents on all things community, all things life-giving.
That's great. I feel like I've heard this before a little bit. Hanging out with you, I'd hope so. With you talk about life giving, then for those of that are watching or listening to this that are thinking about or are in the process of planning a church,
Yep.
are there any key things that you've learned over the last 5 to 10 years that will help build that culture, that focus, that drive to be that life-giving church, regardless of where they may be?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was talking with my team on Wednesday night at our worship night, and I asked them to do 2 things. I want you to dream small, but I want you to live big. And the reason why I said that is because sometimes when we have this life-giving goal, we want to build an entire church that affects the entire valley. That is huge. And honestly, it's kind of daunting. We don't know where to start. We don't know what I can do. I don't know if I have the ability to join that team. And there's a lot of question marks. And I know who I am, and I can't do this and I can't do that, right? This big dream is too much for your moment, right? So I told him, you got to dream small. If you're going to be life-giving, you're bringing it into your life, find small things. And those small things are go to lunch with someone and just tell them what's going on in your life. That's not hard. You do that all the time anyway, you know, just use it for the gospel, you know, buy someone's meal, be a neighborly neighbor, help out with something. Just little dreams, little things add up to be pretty big things, right? And so I'm telling them, you got to live, you got to dream small. And when you're dreaming small, there's no excuses anymore. With dreaming big, it's paralyzing. It's hard to think of where to start. You just have that analysis paralysis oftentimes. But when you dream small, the stakes are lower. It's not too much. It's actually, there's an invitation to become a part of it when it's small and it's something that is accessible and it's something you can do. So dreaming small is really important, actually, to live on an everyday dream. What am I going to do? What's one small thing I can do today to impact the kingdom of God? And then the second half of it is living big. And this is hopefully where each and every one of us feel the biggest challenge. It's because living big is like, it's living larger than you really are. And because you're bringing the kingdom of God with you wherever you go. You know those kind of people that you're around them and you feel better? It's because they're living big. The world of the generous is growing. That's what the Bible says. And those who refresh others will be refreshed. That's one of the verses for us as a church. When we're living big, we're generous. When we're living big, we're refreshing other people. And as we refresh others, we ourselves will be refreshed. And so that looks like maybe you're just a really good high fiver and you give it out again and again. Maybe you're the bear hug guy. Maybe you're like spending time with other people and just inviting them into your home, or you don't have to be loud. You don't have to be boisterous, but you need to live big. You need to love big and care big. And so you got to ask yourself the question, who do I love? Because if I love me and my family and the people that love me back, it's not really living big. Your world is pretty small when you do that. And so that was going to be one of my 2-minute takeaways, but you got it out of me early, Adam.
I unintentionally on this one. I think, well, my takeaway is, and if you're one of those people who have like a bubble of safety, like that radius of like, don't come in. I've got a little bit of that. It's always the fist bumps, or I found that sending Starbucks gift cards from a distance always works really well too.
Hey, that's living big.
It's it's funny. Like I feel like that's our go-to play for years, and it's still in the corporate world amazes me where I try to be tuned in to my peers, my employees that are on my team, and I could tell when something's not right. And just sending a $5 Starbucks gift card out of the blue can flip someone around just like that,
Absolutely.
and really change the mood. And imagine that's without context of Jesus. That's living what
Living big,
right? Living big and do the thing, right? So it remains always blows me away. Just the smallest things, but living in that aspect is what.
Well, and if you really think about it, the dreaming small and living big, it isn't new. It's what Jesus did. Like there was no person or situation too small for him to care. He lived small dreams all the time. We have page after page after page of him talking to the least of these. He's getting Zacchaeus, this little guy, out of a tree. I'm going to go to your house. He's just around the least of these. These are people that they were in the way of the big dream. You know what I'm saying? They were in the way of the big thing. But he was always around them, but he lived big with them too. He wasn't like, okay, I've got a little bit of time, let me give it to you, and I'm out of here. He spent the time. He lived big with them. He was generous with them as well. So it's really just describing the life of Jesus, isn't it?
And then loving it, although it's easier to say a lot of times than or easier to do, harder to do, easier to say. Oh goodness, there we go. Well, I robbed you of your 2-minute original plan. Takeaway, there's a lot of stuff that we covered. You covered the 3 points: the community, fulfillment, and legacy, the core components of really a life-giving church, tuning into God and that frequency of figuring out where and how and when to go, and just doing the thing, living big while thinking and dreaming small. What else do you have for a 2-minute takeaway there? Because I know we're coming out of the end here.
Yeah, I mean, you've dug a lot out of me today. But I think if you're looking at the church world right now, probably the thing that's missing the most is what we described in the dreaming small and living big. Because we walk into a church, we're like, okay, I know I'm supposed to be here because, well, that's what I've been told. And then we walk out going, well, what change did I have? What impact was this on my life? And if we just came and listened to some music and listened to a message, that's all we're going to get. But when we walk in with this attitude that I'm going to dream small and live big for the people in this room, it begins to shift and change the experience of church. Not only because someone's walking in and being ministered to, you're changing their life. When you walk into that church and you are the one who is dreaming small and living big, you're refreshing them and you're refreshing yourself. There's a new spin on why I go to church. I'm not here just to sing and listen. I'm actually here to flip it around a little bit, and I'm going to live big for someone else. And when you walk in with that attitude, it changes Sundays completely. And the more people that have that attitude, the more life-giving that church will be. And then eventually it will begin to spill into the community and everyday lives. And every church needs a life-giving, or every community needs a life-giving church. And every church needs life-giving people to take it there.
Yeah, that's good for me. We got an interesting couple of weeks ahead of us in the road ahead, right? I think you and I have been discussing a handful of topics. Obviously, the storyline of getting to Boise, is
Yeah.
key. What we do now that you're there, how do you launch a church coming up in September? And there's a lot of good road to cover.
Yeah.
There's also some really, really interesting things we've got, possibly thinking about a live option here on YouTube. We'll see how that works out. We've got maybe some in-person stuff with you and I with vacation coming up. So I'm excited to see how that works out.
Oh yeah.
Is there anything that's exciting you and kind of what we've plotted out over the next couple of weeks as we get ready to wrap this up?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two major categories that I think will be pretty cool. We can get really nuts and bolts on tech, portable systems, building a team, even some leadership. Just kind of like this is how it happens, how a church actually happens. But then there's this internal element to the planter that is so critical that if you don't deal with it and do it well, it doesn't matter how strategic you are, it doesn't matter how tech oriented or nuts and bolts you are, you're gonna miss it because your mind and your heart aren't where they're supposed to be. And so we're talking about emotions, finding joy through tough times, just kind of that church plant mental health sort of a deal, because it is church planting brings out those insecurities and you got to know how to deal with them and what God says about you. So that one. And then I'd also like to hear from the people who are listening, like what do you want to hear about? Like what's your number one question when it comes to church planting? I always get it. Well, how did you get here? How are you going to find a place to meet? How do you get people? Like those are the big normal ones. But I know there's some other questions floating out there that maybe that initial conversation to have with people, they don't ask it because they don't think of it. If that's something that out there that you guys have, I'd be happy to answer anything because Adam and I, open books, man. We're ready to rock and roll.
Oh boy, that's scary. I think one of the things too that we tentatively poked on, you touched on mental health,
Yeah.
anxiety, depression, a lot of stuff
Mhm.
that you don't get too much air coverage on. It seems like I
Yeah.
know widespread, especially at the church planning. It's a real emotions; those are real
It
things,
is.
and you got to deal with them. And
Yeah.
there's ways to do it. There's the right ways, and then there's the ways of where I fall and prey to my early 20s, late 20s, shoot,
Yeah.
early 30s. It's just you shove them down,
Mhm.
you figure you'll deal with them later and try
You
never to.
find
It just doesn't work.
you find the biggest box you can and you just stuff them in there.
Throw a couple locks on there and pray for the best, and then Jesus
Yeah.
decides to come through anyways, and you
Yeah.
find some stuff changing quick. So
Yeah.
that'll be some good stuff to carry us through the rest of the summer into
Mhm.
September into launch.
Yeah.
But not to give it all away, TJ, yet again, thank you for week 3 now. I guess episode 3 down.
Boom.
And we're cruising now.
Yeah.
So Refresh Church and everyone watching on YouTube, if you're watching this or any of our past episodes, you can find everything on our YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe as we're putting up new content as frequently as possible. Right now, it's a week. We're a 2-man crew. Maybe that gets more soon. Go to Refresh.Church for information on TJ, his church, the vision, where Refresh Church is heading, and where you can attend if you're in the Treasure Valley. TJ Hankey, until next time we meet again, my friend, have a great night and rest of the week.
Bless you, my friend.
All right, have a great one, everyone.